I'm Jim Hastings. I'm a volunteer with the Campbell County Chamber of Commerce Business Advocacy Committee. And we have here John Bear, who's a candidate for re-election with House District 31. And just going to talk to Mr. Bear. Thank you for being here. And I'm going to ask you one long question, and then I'll just sit back and you can tell us everything. Why are you running, and why should I vote for you? And what is your expertise that you lend to this position?
Well, thank you, Jim, for having me here, as well as the Chamber of Commerce. I appreciate the opportunity to share my answers with the public and your constituents there that are business owners in the community. I am John Bear. I'm running for House District 31. I represent the eastern half of Gillette. I have for the last 2 years after being elected in 2020. The reason I'm running for re-election is because as a freshman, I felt like I accomplished a great deal. And I do feel that the learning curve was steep, but after having accomplished that, I feel like now I can actually accomplish even more. And in particular, one of the accomplishments that I'd like to talk about is the fact that I became a leader amongst the conservative voters within the legislature. And by a leader, I mean that I was able to help them keep their voting together and be much more of a force to move the legislature further to the right. And I believe that's important because as I go around my district and talk to my constituents as well as around other places in the state, I find that my beliefs in how our policies should be implemented and how our state should spend its money are very in line with those people. And we have not been actually that conservative of a state over the years. And a good example of this would be how we dealt with the ARPA funds during the last budget session. We received almost $1 billion from the Biden administration to expend in reaction to the COVID pandemic. And we had until 2024 to spend all those funds. Now, these funds literally are not funds that you and I paid in taxes, but rather funds that were printed and were available to us to expend to help the state out. I argued from the floor of the House that we should not spend all these funds. One of the things that our predecessors did a great job of is creating the Wyoming Permanent Mineral Trust Fund. And to date, 25% of the revenues that the state takes in and spends on our budget come from the earnings of the Wyoming Permanent Mineral Trust Fund. So my suggestion was, if we are going to expend these funds, and again, these are printed dollars, which means when you spend them, or accept them and spend them, you are actually increasing inflation. More money into the market means inflation. The value of everything goes down compared to those dollars. So that's why we're seeing gasoline prices increase. That's why we're seeing grocery prices increase. These are things that affect every one of us, and especially the businesses that are your constituents. So I argued that we should not be expending these funds at all at this point. We had till 2024. Should we have an emergency and need to expend them, we had time to make those expenditures. But if we were going to expend them, I argued that we should put them into the Permanent Mineral Trust Fund, where not only this generation but future generations would receive the benefit from that, as additional principal would be added to those accounts, and therefore additional earnings would be produced, increasing that revenue that we receive from those investments. Now, currently, half of our revenue comes from coal, oil, and gas. We see a war on coal, oil, and gas. That may decrease if we continue down the path we're going. I do fight every day as a legislator against that war on coal, but if we do see a decrease in the revenues from coal, oil, and gas, we will have to find another source. My preference would be those investments, that we would continue to grow the corpus of the Wyoming Permanent Mineral Trust Fund. Now that we've expended all of those ARPA funds, that $1 billion, and very little of it went into the Permanent Mineral Trust Fund, I would recommend that anytime we have a boom, and we're seeing a bit of that right now with the price of coal, oil, and gas, we should put additional revenues into that Permanent Mineral Trust Fund. If we were to cut our expenditures as a state, and stick to just those constitutional required obligations that we have, we could put even more of those funds away for future generations. That would be the thing that I would like to see. I'd like to see more of that happening. That's the kind of movement I would like to see the legislature of Wyoming make. And hopefully that answers your question.
All right. You think of anything else you want to address?
Sure. I have made a huge effort to create transparency in my term as a legislator. And the way I've done that is every night that I'm in the legislature down in Cheyenne, I provide a 5 to 15-minute video of the highlights that happened that day, what I'm voting for, what I'm voting against, and why. I have over 2,000 followers that pay attention to those videos, and that's growing every day. I hope that as we shed light on what is happening in the legislature, more and more people will become involved in the processes, and those policies that we set would more closely represent what the people of Wyoming want. One of the things that gives me the expertise to be a good legislator and a good representative is the fact that I'm a small business owner. I've already experienced what government can do to my business and yours, and I do believe that that experience allows me to make good decisions on behalf of other business owners and economic producers in the state of Wyoming.